Also, go get me a bottle of water.
You've seen us welding and fabricating and blacksmithing on this channel before, and we've talked about why everyone should learn to weld, but we haven't talked too much about the other processes that can be used when you decide you need to use heat to combine metals. In most shops now, that is using an oxyacetylene rig for soldering or brazing. You can also do gas welding using a steel filler rod, but soldering and brazing are the two things you just can't do with an arc welder that sometimes you just have to do. In this video, you'll be watching my friend Swan, an 87-year-old Renaissance man at home in his native element, which is his shop. And it's quite a place. It's a wonderful little window into Sai's world, into his interests and his skills and his hard-charging personality. But it's only a little window, and it's a fairly dirty window at that, a little hard to see through. The whole view of this old man's life and legacy of productivity would take a much, much wider horizon for sure. I hope you enjoy watching Sai demonstrating just a few of the techniques and processes and tricks that he has up his sleeve when he makes his knives and the other beautiful things that come out of his shop.
We use, besides the forge welding, we do a lot of other welding. The main welder we use more than anything else is the MIG welder. I bought a TIG welder here a while back. It's a combination TIG and stick, but I've found that my eyes are so bad that I'm having trouble with the TIG welding. I just don't see well enough to be able to keep my electrode out of the puddle, and I'm just not getting it done. I have the same trouble with the MIG gun. I have trouble seeing what I'm trying to stay in, and I can't follow the seam. I've been told that if I'd get some really big floodlights over the welding table, that it would help me a bunch, and I think it would. I learned to gas weld when I was probably 12 or 14 years old, because that's what we had. And I got to be fairly good at it. And when I went to work in an auto shop when I was 16, I could weld mufflers and things like that, so it was a big asset. But then I learned to stick weld because they had a stick welder there, and that's a much more versatile, well, maybe not so much more versatile, but it's a more useful thing than the gas welder is, because you can get into heavier material, and with the gas welder you have to do a lot of heating to get your material up to a molten state. And all you good welders out there will find all sorts of faults with my welder, because I'm not a really good welder. Scott's a much better welder than I am.
So explain about gas welding, just concept, because I think with stick welding, people are getting it a little bit. It's the electricity that makes the heat. So what is gas welding, and who taught you? You're 14, but who taught you how to do that, and how does it work?
We'll start with the gas welder is a combination of acetylene and oxygen, and it's mixed in the torch to create a very hot flame. My dad taught me how to do this when I was pretty young. I don't even remember how old I was. But that's what we had, and that's what we used. You can also braze with the oxyacetylene torch, and brazing was very useful in repairing cast iron, because it was more difficult to weld cast iron with a stick, and now they have good stick rods that weld cast iron really well. with a stick welder.
Why is it that you can't stick weld normally on cast iron? What is it about cast that doesn't weld the same way?
Cast iron is a really high carbon material, and it's brittle. What cast iron does, as if you're welding it and it cools too fast, it actually breaks a piece out of the parent material, and it just keeps breaking away. Oh. That was the problem we had with the stick welder. But you can eliminate that if you preheat the whole piece and get it pretty hot, and then it doesn't do that contraction, and it doesn't suck that piece out. The cast iron's so brittle that it can literally break itself just sitting there.
Wow. So what is brazing? How does brazing sort of assist, or what exactly was that, like the shortcut or whatever?
Brazing heat is done at a lower temperature, and it heats the cast back into itself quite a ways. Uh-huh. So it's a red heat you're using, probably 14 to 16, 1700 degrees. And you still want to cool that slowly, because if it chills too fast, you get little spider cracks in it, and it's not strong.
So in brazing, are you melting the parent?
You're not
the cast?
melting the parent. It just adheres, and it gets down into the pores, and it adheres pretty good, and it's a strong thing. But another thing I've done with the brazing, we had to build up some big steady rests when I was building that cannon and mortar. And the steady rests have bars that come out from the frame to keep the materials rotating in a circle. And I brazed a heavy strip of brass on those so that they would run on the steel and not galled.
Oh.
The brass will run against something like that and not seize up. So you can braze things, and I still braze things once in a while. Hydraulic lines were on the cats and stuff. If you broke a steel hydraulic line, you could lots of times get it to braze up, but the problem with brazing something is it needs to be pretty clean. Oh. And getting the oil out of a casting or even a steel tube to clean it up enough to really braze it is hard, but it can be done.
So are you adding material? You're heating it up to the lower temperature, and then you're adding
brass, and the brass builds up on it, or it doesn't. You don't want to build huge mounds of brass, because if you don't get your brass down in and make a good connection on your base, then stacking it up really doesn't help you, because you haven't fixed the first problem.
Got it. So with brazing, it's adhering and sticking to the parent or the cast or whatever it may be, but it's unlike welding, it's not becoming...
Right, it doesn't mix.
And so gas welding, to come back to that, that's like the next step up in heat, where you're heating it up enough with a torch. And let's see the torch. It's different than a cutting torch, you said, or is it similar? Or what's
the one I use for brazing or soldering my guards on is a #1 tip, and it's a small tip. It's awkward in this big handle, but that's the way I use it. There are other gas welding tips, and they come in all sizes. This is a medium-sized one. It's about a 3. I used a 5 for a long time for heat treating my blades, because it's a big blade and it's real controllable heat. And I heat treated most of knife blades with the oxyacetylene torch.
So the rest of the valve is, and it's the same fuel as a cutting torch. It's just a different tip out here
Right.
from what a cutting torch would do in terms of
and
the
it
mixture.
mixes in here and comes out the end.
So what are you using gas welding for these days? Because you said you still gas weld. So what kind of things are you
Well,
gas welding, or have you
solder
gas welded?
all my guards on. And when I say solder, this is actually a brazing process because it gets up to 1100 degrees.
Okay.
This is a really hard silver solder.
Oh.
And we'll do that in a little while here.
Okay.
And you can watch hopefully you can watch the solder flow, because it's pretty neat when it goes, because it just goes
It sucks in.
and it sucks it right down.
It's kind of like soldering plumbing and copper. It's kind of the same
It is.
type
It's
of thing.
the same thing. It
Just way hotter.
Yeah. That's around a 400 degree solder. This is 1100.
Wow.
And this is super strong.
Yeah.
You can actually take a hammer and just whale on this.
Oh,
And
really?
it will bend the brass and tear things up before the solder comes off.
This is probably so obvious, but you can't weld brass to steel otherwise. I mean, brazing is kind of your only option for this, making this connection. I'm wondering, could a person make that with a welder, or is that a separate kind of thing?
I can't.
Okay, but technically it can be done.
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's trying to join a metal that melts at 1700 degrees and a metal that melts at 25 or 2600 degrees. But you sneak up on this because you don't want to overheat your steel.
Yeah.
And you try to do it as cool as you can. I don't like to have that spot in my knives that's messed with the hardening and the tempering process, but it works for me, and I've got heat stoppers that I put on the blade that keeps the heat from running out the blade, and I can hold it in the ricasso, and it seems to work real well. When I have to build something up and I don't want to use the MIG gun, I can weld like this webbing in with the gas torch and keep it thin. You see, that's really, really thin, and keep it controlled, because you're putting the filler rod in just in little places and trying to keep your heat from melting out the whole thing. Now, a really good arc welder could do that too with an arc machine, MIG gun, or actually with a TIG gun.
Is it the same filler that like a TIG welder would use to like insert material, or is it something different?
It would
for
be the
gas?
same filler. If he was TIGging this, he'd TIG it with a steel rod.
Okay. So it's really just how are you applying the heat? Is it with a TIG?
And TIG is almost like gas welding, because you're using that electrode to heat that, and then you're filling it with a rod, and you're doing the same process, and it just irritates the snot out of me that I can't see that anymore to keep that damn thing out of the puddle. Because you've got to be right there, it's got to be close, and if you get too far into the puddle, you've contaminated your tungsten. You got to take it out and grind it and start over again, and it's I just can't seem to get it anymore.
So the TIG is more like, it's like a scalpel. You can really put the heat exactly where, whereas the gas welder, it's a little more like blunt, although it kind of is still safer than blowing it out with a stick machine or something.
And all of these, the human being is capable of incredible things. And some of the things I see on YouTube now, they just blow me away what these guys are doing.
Yeah.
You know, and some of the Damascus patterns they're making, I'm hoping here, if I get caught up a little more, that I'll be able to explore some of them, because they're bizarre. They're just not only beautiful, they're intricate, and they fascinate me. You know, it's one thing to make a Damascus pattern like this. This is going to a guy in Florida.
Oh, wow. Yeah, nice.
And it's one thing to do a Damascus pattern like that. It's pretty simple, really. But some of the things they're doing are just so off the wall.
Yeah, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy, though. Something can be simple. I'm looking at that Damascus that might be simple indeed, but that doesn't mean it's easy to do.
It's, once you have the process made, it's not really, and the tools.
There you go.
That hammer makes,
Yeah. Good luck doing it without that hammer.
right.
Yeah.
You'd wear yourself out.
Yeah.
And even my friends that have smaller hammers, now your dad's 200-pound hammer is way capable of doing anything this is. It's just a little bit slower. But I have friends with 100-pound little giants, and they come and want to use this or are impressed with how much more steel they can move in a matter of minutes
Yeah.
than it'd take them an hour to do this, where this will do it in 10, you know.
Show me the frog, and what was the gas welding aspect on that little guy?
I welded his front legs back on. They got torn by the time I got them all. I cut them out of the original block, but by the time I got them formed, they were torn, and I gas welded them back on. And I did the same thing, and if you can see it, you can see the little evidence of puddles around there. I think that I built up his eyes with the gas welder too.
When you're making a sculpture like this, do you print some pictures out or something to remember what a frog looks like, or you
don't.
catch one, or how do you just go
don't.
from memory?
I just do it,
Wow.
and they're not anatomically correct. There's actually one joint missing in this back leg, and I put it in there to start with because I was trying to get it right, but it was so damn long I couldn't get it folded up. Their legs are tremendously long, and they've got another third joint in here that I couldn't, so I ended up cutting it off and sticking it back on.
Interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, when you're gas welding, you've got to establish a puddle. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, but this will actually start to puddle here when it gets hot. That's another thing about gas welding, it's a way lot slower than the arc welding is. So that's one reason it's not as popular too. Hey, can you see that start to flow?
Ah, man, I can't with my naked eye.
Probably
but
not.
Maybe the camera's getting it. Can you penetrate as far with this? Is that one of the limitations with gas welding, is like the ability to weld thicker material?
Yes.
You just can't get the heat like as deep at times.
You can't get the intense heat down there that quick.
So how deep, or I guess how thick a material structurally can gas welding
You can weld 1/2 inch. I mean, but you'd have to have a bigger torch, a bigger tip, like a number 6 or number 5. And then you'd have to get, like you see, it took me a few minutes there to get that heat
Yep.
started and get that built up. Well, you have to get that whole body of stuff up, and then it has to get up to melting temperature, and then be able to run that rod in, and you'd have to have some bigger rods and run it in faster. And
Yeah, but you can do it.
I've welded 1/2 inch with it years ago.
Wow.
That's all we had, you know. So that's the way you did it.
This next thing is not welding, it's brazing. And Cy is going to braze on the guard on this knife that he's making. And if you didn't know, he makes and sells knives from his website. They're all 100% custom, handmade by him in his shop right here. They're really beautiful and special. And you ought to at least visit his website to get a closer look. But this is how he fastens the guards.
I think these little guys that are getting homeschooled have some definite advantages right now. They call this purple heat eater, and I'm sure that you're too young to remember the Purple People Eater was a song. Did you ever hear that?
I know I've heard of it, but I can't remember it. But I definitely heard that little phrase.
Anyhow, they call this the purple heat eater, and it's really good stuff.
So it's like, what is it, like a clay of some type, or just?
It's must have some sort of refractory kind of cement, because it kind of gets hard when it gets hot.
And then does it kind of like, you can recycle it and use it again?
Yeah. Yeah, if it doesn't end up on the floor.
Yeah.
But I used to wrap rags around it and do all sorts of standing on my head, and this is so much easier, and it's so much better.
Oh, you would wrap like a wet rag to try to absorb up the heat from this. Got it.
This just, it sticks most of the time, but sometimes it wants to fall off.
Oh, there it goes.
See, that went all the way around, Nate.
Sucked it. Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah. I'll shut this off a minute and really check, but I'm sure it's done.
So the guard is brass, and your filler there is brass, right?
No, it's silver solder.
Oh, okay. Okay, that answers that. Sorry.
But your dad wanted me to run some brass on that thing. He just wanted to. I don't know why he thought that was important, but we'll run a little brass on that.
Inside the same crack here?
No, on that piece that we welded the gas
Oh,
welder.
okay.
Now, after this cools off a little bit, I put a little bit of water on it, but I don't like to chill it. But it's already gone cool past critical temperature. And I'm going to drop it in a can of soda water.
Oh.
And the flux that I put on there is very, very caustic. It will literally rust things like crazy if you don't get it off.
That's the soda water in there?
Yeah.
Huh. This looks nice.
Everyone is different. Like some.
Yeah, that looks great. Beautiful. Okay, love it.
Yeah.
Be a nice one.
It's the, you'll get this just right up to a nice red heat.
Wow.
Can you see that?
Yeah. Wow, that is cool. Jeez.
And you can build that up and make it thick and then machine it. It'll turn or polish.
So brass doesn't like bond to steel the way steel does. It's not like a weld in that regard, but it's certainly gripping it with
Right.
some amount of
Right.
force.
Yeah.
Wow. So you can build up and coat and
Yeah, it actually is a coat, but it's strong. Like
yeah.
you know, I got
Yeah, it's on there.
pound on that pretty good. It's
Wow, that is so cool.
yeah.
Jeez, it comes out like almost like smoother than
Oh, you can make it really smooth.
with a welder.
Yeah, but that's a function of the applicator too.
Oh, yeah.
If I had been real steady, I was having a little trouble standing up because my feet weren't steady.
Yeah.
And I was wobbly.
Right.
If I had been a real steady position,
Yeah.
you can run that in there just as smooth.
So with gas welding, can you get the coating or the bead kind of smoother than with when you're shooting an arc at it, just because you control the heat differently?
Some guys are so good with that arc welder, Nate. It's unbelievable what
Yeah.
they can do. You know.
Yeah.
Like I said yesterday, I can stick things and I can, but I never did really. When I was working in that shop, we used two welding rods. We had 6011 and 7018.
And everything was one of those too.
Right. It was, and I didn't even know what the prefix number meant, and it's the tensile strength of the rod. And they have 90 and 110. They can have alloys that are way stronger, and
Yeah.
but I didn't learn all that till kind of late in life.
And even when you learned it, it probably didn't change what you were doing. You still probably grabbed the
Right. And the 6011 is a kind of a what they call a farm rod. You could weld rusty stuff with it. You could weld, it'll go through grease and oil and still make a decent weld, although it's not as pretty.
Yeah.
But the 7018 things need to be pretty clean and nice, and they get a much stronger weld. So anyhow, there's all kinds of things about it. I don't know.
The bottom line is gas welding is still a part of your toolkit and a part of like your workflow here for not just the knives, but sounds like other things as well.
Yeah, I use it. It's not as much as I used to, but I do use it. And the guys now are doing all their muffler work and everything with these electric welders.
Yeah.
And they can dial them in so nice and tight, and it's just. The thing of this, especially the MIG gun, is you can't use it in the wind.
Oh.
It blows the gas right away.
So is TIG seems kind of similar to gas welding.
It's very much the same because you're using that electrode to heat the metal.
Guys, thanks for watching this video to the very end. I assume you appreciate Swan the way I do, since you made it this far. Might I recommend my two favorite Swan videos, and we've made a lot of them, I think like probably 15 or 20, I don't know. But two of my favorites are, first, the one where he talks about his diet. And he's a cattle guy, so you can guess he probably eats a lot of beef, but you gotta watch it. He's way ahead of his time. And number two, the video where he's sharing the story about the lake that he built in California back in the day. It's a really great story. Yeah, I might have to go watch it again myself. Very inspiring. This guy has done it all. I'll put links to both of those up. Thanks for watching. Keep up the good work. We'll catch you next time.